putting St. Louis County on notice that we looked.
This happened in June, so this was for the May distribution. Noticed in June and then began our effort to communicate, find who to communicate, so that we can alert them to this error. So it started in June.
Did anyone else at St. Louis County make any, have any statements about how they thought this happened?
Other than what I was told on Friday, it was an error. And then today, I was told that it was a coding error and that it was overwritten. And how that happens, I don't know exactly. But I imagine that when so the supervisors who I spoke with today, one of the supervisors in that department, and they indicate that this is a process. It involves some analysis that they're doing. Other than it was a coding error that got overwritten. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Jack.
So does the error still exist and they're trying to figure that out, or they figured that out and now they're going to have to go back, or do we know?
I don't know.
Okay, so the error could still possibly, for the next couple months, we could have the same.
I would hope not. You know, I would hope that we would see a reduction that mirrors what the historical trend should be for the next distribution. Okay. Now that they know that there's an error.
Right. But we'll be watching it, and if
definitely, definitely.
Oh, Alderwoman Tice.
And then I'll just reiterate the point I made last night, that hopefully Dan Cook can really help the city look at the formula and make sure that St. Louis County is correct in not just what they take back, but what we're getting. And if there's been some error in the formula that, apparently happened in May, June timeframe, make sure we're back to what we should be, and what is the formula, and was it right in March?
Right.
And is the March formula the same as the October formula, or November, whenever it goes back? So hopefully we are able to work well with the county and make sure that that happens. The transparency happens at the level where it's, we obviously can't see that, but.
Right. So that will be the request. That is the information that we expect to get. I know that the Municipal League has indicated that they would want to do, I think they use the word that formula. And the contract with Cook and Riley go as far back as maybe 2015. So I think it was a wise decision, a good decision for the Board of Aldermen to engage them to help us monitor and review the sales.
Yeah, I agree. I think the good news in this is that we were instrumental in catching this, and the other good news is that we haven't spent it. The question that I have is, what do we do while it's being investigated and all of that? We are still holding on to this money. Do we need to do something with it to separate it out from certain things, or?
I don't think so, because
because we don't even know how much they're going to want to have back. So, but we have an idea.
We're ballparking it, and when I spoke to them today, they couldn't give me a number. So it's just in the city's money market account. We haven't separated it.
And we don't need to be worried, like we were talking yesterday, you don't think there's any worry about any interest being earned on top of that, even though it's not our money necessarily.
We don't know what the county's going to request. Money that sits in a money market account is earning interest.
Right.
So
Okay.
we'll wait, and once we hear, we'll share it with the board, and then
Great. Thank you.
Eric, take us away.
All right. So just to kind of start off with the updated pages from yesterday, as the staff kind of re-looked at everything, we really took a hard look at some of the revenue lines, and mainly because when we did revenue first, we always kind of start with revenue when you do the budget. And so we really kind of did that early on. Did I just lose the presentation again. Fun if this happens again. It's a different computer too. There it is. Okay. So we took a look at the revenue, I think in July or August, and kind of brought that to the Ways and Means Committee first. And then once we did that, we got the 21 audited numbers. So we're able to kind of look at the audited numbers again and look at how we're doing through September. And that's why we saw a little bit of change in some of those financial, some of those accounts. So like the municipal fire sales tax is performing really well this year. And I think as was discussed yesterday, we're comfortable with those numbers, mainly because a lot of these other taxes come straight from the state, whereas our sales tax or general fund comes from the county, so all the other ones were in line. So we updated a couple, like 5 or 6 revenue lines as I put in there, and then that did the ballpark of 28 other pages that had to be changed, like the charts, the graphs, and things like that. So that's kind of where we got to for you guys yesterday. So I'm just going to give you kind of a general overview of the budget. I won't take too long, as all the other staff will be presenting for you guys. As Bola said, this is obviously a team effort. All the department heads have to be able to get us all their information in a timely manner so we can provide it for you guys, so I want to thank them as well. And the most important thing is we have a balanced budget. Per state statute, we need to present one to you. We have in all funds, and I think for the first time since we implemented our fund balance policy, we meet the fund balance policy in all funds. So we breached that 50% in general fund this year. So we're very excited about that and happy to kind of be able to present that. We also included, we modeled in the funding recommendation from the 2022 compensation plan. So that's already in the budget, as well as 8 new positions. So 3 police officers, the finance controller, and then the 4 positions in Parks and Recreation, the arborist, the horticulturalist, and 2 park maintenance staff people. The 7 or the 8, the police, and the 4 in Parks and Recreation are in direct response to Brentwood Bound and Brentwood Park opening next year. So hopefully you can see this decently, but this is kind of what I think is the most important slide and the most important thing. It is page bullet 22, I think, in the budget book. So I think the idea is what are our revenues, what are our expenditures, and more importantly, what's the fund balance at the end of each year. So you'll see in the general fund, we finished this year with a $5.5 million fund balance. We have some of that is still, I'm sorry, I looked at the wrong column, the 7.9 fund balance at the end of this year. We have $24,000 for this police seizure fund, which leaves us about $7.9 million, which is 59% of operating reserves. Our fund balance is 59%, which is great. We continue to kind of build that over the next couple of years, and it doesn't grow exponentially in the few years. And you see expenditures rising up, so that's the one thing we're going to have to keep an eye on as we move forward. Capital Improvement Fund is a very similar story. We are estimating at the end of this year about a $5 million fund balance. That will obviously change when we make the payment on the fire truck, as was approved last night at the board meeting. But we'll still have a healthy fund balance. And you'll see we have 5%, which is that capital reserve based in there, and then everything else is in that equipment replacement reserve. And that was something started with Bola and Gina back in 2013, 14, 15, some of that time, right? And the idea was, I think, the last time we bought a fire truck, or when we bought the fire truck that time, was to not have to lease it in the future. And so that's kind of why we built, the city tries to build this reserve, and it's a great use of being able to use that to cash fund the fire truck. The trick is, as I think I'll mention later, is just making sure that we continue to replenish that reserve. So in 10 years from now, 7 years from now, we can buy another fire truck. So that's kind of the fund balance. Economic development sales tax, it's the same story you've been hearing about the EDST. About $850,000 each year in adding to the fund balance. So we end 3.7 and we'll be up to about 6.5 by the end of 2025 if we don't use any of that fund balance for anything. Stormwater Parks Improvement Fund, this is, for me, the happiest story because as you see at the end of 2023, hopefully we are done with Brentwood Bound. I get all those expenditures and revenue out of there, and I can really show my fund balance again. And so we are showing a $2 million fund balance, and so that gets us in good position moving forward with the rest of Parks and Recreation. And then the sewer improvement fund is very steady. It continues to bring in a little bit of money each year, and we continue to then repay the general fund, the money that was loaned to the sewer improvement fund in the past. So, and feel free to stop me anytime. So, just quickly, the revenue
May I ask a
sources.
question?
Yeah, in general, if you've got a question, please feel free to answer. Go ahead.
So on the capital improvement fund, when the fire truck is purchased, what is the anticipation that we would dip under the 5% capital reserve, or is the anticipation we would cut other capital expenses to pay for the fire truck?
What will happen is it will come out of the equipment replacement reserve. We do not have a percentage for that. The 5% is just the capital reserve of the total expenditures of the capital fund. So the reserve has just been building.
So it's a separate reserve?
Separate
reserve.
reserve.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
It's a
Thank
separate
you for the
reserve.
clarification.
And on that, even if we authorize we have authorized the purchase of it, but the funds to buy it aren't going to happen until it's built, correct? Is that right?
Yes.
So what year is that? We're talking about
2025.
25, right?
And so what that does, please, go ahead.
So it gives us time to build that fund up a little bit more
Absolutely.
in anticipation of
Other-
that purchase.
right.
And other capital improvements.
So another thing, unless you were going to discuss it, because we no longer have to budget for that interest payment, were you going to address that?
Yeah, later.
Go ahead.
So one of the things we talked about, it will be coming up, is that because we don't have that expenditure in the capital fund now, we have $48,000 in 23, another 48 in 24, and $200,000 in 25 that are currently, which you'll see in the presentation, still on the books. And so if there's something that the board or the Ways and Means Committee wants to see, maybe, because we did have to defer some capital projects, so if we want to see something brought back forward, we can have that discussion with that extra funding. As I said, the one thing, we've been good about increasing this fund primarily through good leadership through the staff, making sure that, that we are under budget for our expenditures, we don't, use everything, and so we've been growing that fund balance pretty quickly the last few years. We just need to make sure that as we get closer and closer to a balanced budget in capital especially, that we maybe think about needing to put some money aside each year to build that equipment reserve. So this year, we're doing about $20,000.
In addition, what about the sanitation? Do you want to?
Yeah, one of the things that, if the board is interested, I think one of the things that will be coming in the next Public Works meeting, or Ways and Means, I'm not sure which one, is since we're doing this cash funding with the fire truck, do we want to take that secondary sanitation truck that we've received a grant for, and then just cash fund that as well? We're budgeting about $75,000 a year for that over the next 3 years, 23, 24, 25. So it'd be another $225,000 that would dip into the reserve. We feel comfortable doing that. I don't know how much more we'd want to talk about cash funding because we don't want to spend everything right up front. We want to still be able to kind of have that healthy reserve. But it is something we can, for an item for discussion, and it might be a good idea.
I mean, I think, I was happy to see the shift in the fire truck purchase with cash as opposed to leasing it. I think in general, in order for us to continue to maintain a healthy growth toward a even better credit rating, less debt that we can take on if we can purchase certain capital improvements with cash, especially if we can plan for them and put money aside to it. I would definitely support that.
So just a quick chart about the revenues, and it's no shock that we derive a lot of our revenues from sales tax. It's 63%. Intergovernmental, which is kind of grants, partnerships, things like that, is the secondary. But that's just a quick slide for you guys to see, which again is in the budget book. The general fund, the revenue highlights earlier this is we do see a 7% increase over 21 adopted budget. As we talked about a lot, we did increase sales tax, and, you know, we were conservative. I think when we were finalizing the budget, we had 7.2 in through, I think, August, and then we were only budgeting 6.5 for next year because we were still kind of questioning. Hearing what we've heard over the last few days, we just went back to being conservative and just showing a 1% growth. We think what we saw in adopted 21 or the audited 21 numbers, we think, you know, we'll hit that number again this year, and probably, to be honest, will be over. I mean, we've seen revenue increase because of inflation and things like that, but again, until we have firm numbers from St. Louis County, we want to be very, very conservative. Municipal fire sales tax, one of the things we kind of talked about is we did increase that number a little bit. I think it was around $30,000, and you'll see why, because in 21 we hit the $1.7 million mark, and we're already at 1.3 this year through September, so we feel comfortable with the new numbers that we provided. The use tax is a big one. We talked about being conservative last year, and we were really conservative. I think we budgeted $550,000, and we're already at $765,000. Oh no, that was the actual last year, the audited number, and we're already at $927,000. So we're averaging $100,000 a month. So we did increase use tax, and again, we feel comfortable with the numbers we provided. Occupational license and building permits are the same story. We took a look at the audited numbers. We took a look at see what where we're at through September, and in some cases, like the building permits, we've already surpassed what we budgeted for in 22. So those are all good numbers, and we feel comfortable with everything. The one question that we thought everyone might see is ARPA funding. So if you looked in 2021 when we received the money, the audited numbers came back and didn't show any revenue in the ARPA fund account line. We asked that question, like, why wasn't, where is it? And what we found out was that it's an unearned revenue. So it's audited as unearned revenue because we hadn't, I guess the auditor didn't know what the plan for the city was. This year, when we got the $800,000, we talked about the fact that it's being transferred to capital. Auditor saw that right away. He's like, that I understand. I'll move that into revenue now, and we for next year. So once we told him that the idea of that first year was to repay lost revenue that the city had during COVID, he was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It'll show up in 22. So that's why you see nothing in 21 and the $1.6 million in 22. So any questions about revenue? All right, so expenditures. You know, just kind of a highlight of each department because I know they'll come up and talk a little bit more about it. But administration, we did includes funding for the new controller position, as we talked about, and we do transfer money to help with the 2018 COPS payment. Fire, we included funding to return overtime to the 2019 level, which is, I know, something both chiefs were passionate about. Legislative includes funding for sustainability again this year. It's the same $20,000 that we had last year. We hope to be able to see greater use of that as we get the sustainability plan finalized and hopefully approved at the board level. Planning development, one of their big increases is the funding for the new design guidelines. That's why their miscellaneous contractual line went up. Police has the 3 new officers and back to 2019 funding levels. And Public Works was pretty steady. They didn't see much of a change in their expenditures from this year, from last year. So just a kind of brief thing about capital. The sales tax, we did increase our 2022 estimation based on 21 actual and year to date. So you'll see through September, we're already at $2.2 million. And that's kind of what we see in line with other sales taxes, so, or other taxes that we get from the state. So we see that, so we increase that a little bit. We're still being pretty conservative, we feel, on that revenue line. So where does capital money go? If you're ever wondering, 49% of it goes to debt service and leases. And so this year, and that number will drop without the fire truck and if we move the trash truck out of there, but it'll still be a healthy amount. 7% of it goes to computers and data services, all the stuff that IT needs to do to make sure we're up and running. And as I talked about before, we did defer some capital projects, which I'll talk about here in a second. The 5-year CIP, as we talked about, does include the fire truck lease. And So that is, as we talked about, that could be additional funding if we want for another project or another vehicle or something like that. But again, we need to be cognizant of continuing to rebuild that reserve. We hadn't touched it in a while, and so now that we want to do it for the fire truck and possibly other equipment, we need to make sure that we rebuild it so we have it again when the next big purchase comes up.
Alderman Gould.
Question, on the fire truck lease, have we looked into, are there ways to buy out that lease and just, so that we have it as an owned asset as opposed to continuing to pay the lease, or is it, if we have?
Yeah, the ambulance this is the last year of the lease, so.
Okay.
So yeah, and same way with the other trash trucks. So we have 2 leases that'll come off the books in '23. So
Okay.
it'll be the last year for both of those.
Got it, okay. Thank you.
So the expenditure highlights, some of the things: fires, purchasing technical rescue equipment. IT, as we discussed, is all the computers and printers, maintenance support, and subscription contracts on all IT-related systems. The Vigilon, the camera systems, the door locks, all the hardware for the computer, all that stuff. Police has 2 patrol vehicles. Public Works has HVAC replacement for this building, and I'll be very happy when this room is comfortable for long periods of time, so I appreciate that one. The street surface sealant project is going to go in there, and that's, as Dan's talked about that in the past, I think at Public Works and maybe even at Ways and Means, and the importance of doing these sealants to extend the life of the roads that we've done. And we have the Russell Avenue STP improvement, so that's the grant that we received for Brentwood Bound. It's just the city portion of it. And then here we said, here's the leases, the 24, 14, 17, 18 cops, ambulance lease, the rescue engine, and the sanitation truck. So there's 2. There'd be 2 if we purchase that second one. So what did we defer? And we try to keep it in the 5-year CIP, but sometimes it went 1 year, sometimes it went 3 years. The fire department is talking about the UTV, specifically for Brentwood Bound. They have command vehicles that had to be deferred back a year or 2, and then also their compressor, their SCBA compressor. The police department, as you heard, Chief said yesterday, he would, in a perfect world, he'd get 4 new vehicles a year. We're showing 2 this year and 1 in future years, so it's behind his schedule. So that is part of everything else. And then Public Works, the City Hall roof project is, I think, deferred 2 years because he was trying to do that this year. We've taken the street sweeper and the Mike Knight Road microsurface, and we've pushed those back as well. What we had to do to kind of balance our budget.
Alderman, did you have a question?
Yes, on all the vehicles, are we keeping track of, making sure that a few years from now, we're not going to be hit with several trash trucks and, so that we're kind of alternating when we're purchasing all of these things? I mean, I know as we keep kind of taking 4 to 2 or 4 to 3, then does that build up a significant amount of purchases needed in like 4 or 5 years? Or is somebody kind of keeping track of all of that?
So what's interesting about the trash trucks is because we haven't replaced them for a long time. So just this afternoon, so I think we have 3. We bought a new one, and the other 2 are down.
Right.
And so they're in the shop. There are supply chain issues. There are not enough parts. And so what we had factored into the budget was initially $10,000 if we needed to rent a trash truck for a month. But because we needed to cut and balance the budget, we reduced it from 10 to 4. So Dan's going to be meeting with Gina to try to identify money, savings somewhere in his budget, so that if push comes to shove and they're unable to repair them by late Wednesday, for instance, we will have to go rent one. So when we are having those kind of ongoing maintenance expenses for the trash truck in particular, I don't know that, deferring it even longer than now is a good move.
Right. Because
then we'd be spending more money on the maintenance. So who knows, we might be coming back to you since we've now identified this equipment reserve, a decision point for the board. What do we do? And just to also say, so the police will be purchasing 3 because there was a approval
Yeah, last night.
last night. And if opportunity exists, once we take another look at the budget, we should be able to easily come back and say, there's now money. The board, do you want to fund the additional 2 for the department? So those are things that we will continue to look at before this budget goes before the Board of Aldermen.
Yeah, just trying to avoid the perfect storm of, the fact that supply chain and all of these are adding delays, and we keep deferring, and then all of a sudden we don't have that staggering that we would like to have in order to,
It might not be ideal with the trash trucks just because they're old and we haven't been replacing them, but we're definitely keeping that in mind with other vehicles that the
Okay.
city has.
okay, thank you.
I don't know quite when the right time to make this comment is, but since it has to do with these deferred capital projects, I noticed when looking at what has been deferred, many of the things, like the UTV for the fire department's 2027, well, Brentwood Bound's opening, so it just seems, if it's needed for Brentwood Bound, then, and it's a safety thing, then just something else in the budget need to be cut. The McKnight Road microservicing, will continue to be Pawnee until 2026, according to the budget. There's no money for streetlights or traffic calming, and traffic calming is one of the, probably the, other than water runoff, we hear a lot about traffic calming. Maybe there's stuff sitting
There's
there.
money for traffic calming. I think there's been direction from the board to always budget to buy maybe 3 or 4.
Okay.
And then he still has some in backup.
And back up. So it just seems like there's some things on here that residents regularly talk to us about, and it seems hard when those things get deferred 4 and 5 years out.
Right.
So
So you know what? We take a look at this every year, and it's really based on revenue. And then we have a conversation with the department directors. What can we reprioritize? So I expect that maybe with freeing up some money in capital, it's not that expensive to buy the UTV. So we might be able, we're going to schedule a meeting with really 3 department directors, the police chief, the fire chief, and public works, to see what are some of the items that can be moved up. So the UTV, if there are no chain supply issues, then maybe we might be able to schedule that for mid-year, purchase mid-year. So those are things that we're looking at. Another factor that we talk about in the transmittal memo is we've been very deliberate in terms of, and Eric, maybe you can speak to it, doing a calculation on how much we would contribute from each of the funds to the stormwater to pay the 2018 cops. So then that reduces money that we would ordinarily spend on other things, but those were decisions that were made by the board. So we will continue to look at those. The capital improvement 5-year plan is a moving target. And so we're able to fund things now and maybe defer things, but it really depends on department directors on what they think is critical and listening to you all, the board, and residents as well.
And one of the things that I failed to mention, which goes back to traffic calming, is when we took a look at capital this year, we made sure that we talked about things actually fit the capital definition. So it needs to be something, 15, 20,000 or greater with a, multiple years life expectancy. So things like street signs that had always been in kind of the capital got moved into operational. And so traffic calming got moved into the public works operational budget.
And I may have misspoken because since we weren't talking about that topic, I haven't looked at Dan's budget yet. So I was just looking at back at the capital. So sorry, I just didn't see it in capital, and that's probably why. So thank you.
Yeah, it's my fault. I forgot to mention it. So we kind of talked through EDST already. There wasn't much else to kind of talk about economic development sales tax besides the fact that we continue to bring in money. We're making our 2019 COPS payment and still earning about $800,000 in fund balance every year. So moving on to stormwater and parks, we did once again saw a conservative increase in sales tax, much like we talked about in capital. But what we're really excited about is fees and charges returning to pre-COVID levels. And really, we see them in a couple big areas: general programming, senior programming, and ice rink commission and rentals. General programming, we have a wonderful new employee who's really kind of taken the ball, and we wanted to let her run with programming, and she's done a wonderful job already, and we're really excited to see what we're going to be able to do in the new park. So we're already ramping up lots of different programs, youth, adult, senior, all types of programs for that park. So we'll continue to see hopefully that rise. And ice rink is, it is still kind of the focal point of the department. It brings in healthy revenue that helps us with some of the other things like senior programming. Senior programming, they increased so much because we took it back over. We kind of laid the groundwork this year, and we're going to increase more next year. So, and I'll talk more about that during my presentation. But again, the highlights, it does include the 4 new personnel, funding for stormwater projects. So we know we have the new stormwater plan. And so we continue the $40,000 a year. That's kind of been a placeholder for the past 10 years. We haven't used it a whole lot, and I expect that we'll start using it now, which will be great. I mean, that's part of the purpose of having the stormwater master plan. The 2018 COP set service, as Bola talked about, it's from all 3 funds, 25% from the general fund, 50% for capital, and then 25% again from the stormwater fund. And we are focused on 3 specific capital projects: the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which is a critical piece for this year as we've added new parkland in Brentwood Park. The Memorial Park Bridge replacement, that is the longer, bigger bridge over Black Creek. So we'll be needing to replace that this year, and then a small utility vehicle for Brentwood Park.
Question about the Black Creek or Memorial Park Bridge. I think the last time we talked about it at Public Works, we were talking about doing both bridges at the same time and realizing some economies of scale as far as the cost. Is that still the plan, or is that changed now?
It's changed a little, mainly because the smaller bridge was underwater twice during flooding. So we are working with FEMA to see if that can get replaced with
FEMA?
Yep.
Got it. Understood. And then I had one more question about the revenue line for the park permits. Wouldn't we expect to see a little bit of an increase with the new park coming on?
We do. Let me get the exact number for you.
There really wasn't a significant increase, it didn't seem like, which is fine if we want to be conservative, which I'm always supportive of, but
yeah, I think what you see is a couple things. We're being a little bit conservative with rental, with ball field rentals, because one, we continue to see increases in our league. So as we see increases, we have less time to rent. So we drop back our ball field rentals a little bit. The bandwagon, not that it brought in a lot of revenue, but we've seen a decrease in usage from bandwagon, renting that out to other municipalities. And so what we did see was an increase in pavilion rentals. But what we were worried about, which is why we're a little conservative, is increase at Brentwood Park would then decrease possibly Memorial and Oak Tree. So that's where we're being a little bit conservative, and maybe too conservative, but we'd like to see an operation first before we go too crazy with it.
Yeah, and I guess we won't be in full swing with it until maybe fall of 2023, is that right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we'll be able to open up, we're hoping to open up the main park June, July, or May, June, as we talked. And so the pavilion will be available to rent. We think we'll see a lot more rentals once the playground is completed.
And then can you explain I mean, it's small, but why are we at 0 with rink concessions? Do we just not do concessions at the rink anymore?
No, we haven't done, since renovation, we haven't done it. That line, we had a little bit of money in that line over the past few years. Right. Primarily, we used to sell Six Flags passes as part of a MPRA program. Six Flags stopped that program during COVID and hasn't really brought it back. So that's where that minuscule revenue kind of left. The vending line is where we see any revenue come in for sodas and candy, things like that.
Okay, I'm just curious about that. I don't think I've ever asked about it before, so.
Yeah, it was a sad day when that happened.
I bet.
Because the free soda did not do me, I mean, I took advantage of it, but it was my stomach took advantage of it too. So yeah, so that's revenue, expenditures, I think. Oh, the last is Brentwood Bound. So again, I am ecstatic more than anyone else, just not only the fact that the project will be done and we'll have this beautiful new park to play around in, but that my fun will be back to normal. And I can actually, I think this year, with a lot of help with Gina and Bola, I could actually find the $97 million in expenditures in the different account lines, and then the $97 million of revenue. So we've got that all in. It means that next year we're about $7.2 million in revenue with 13 in expenditures. The one caveat of all that is some of the revenue coming in will be after projects are done. So like the STP grant for the GRG Part B, it's $1 million. We'll get that once that project is completed. So we'll have to be very cautious, Craig and the finance director and myself, to make sure where we're at with funding for that. And if we need to dip into fund balance a little bit, we just need to make sure that we're being cautious about that next year. So, but when it's all done, we'll have a wonderful party to kick it off, and we'll have a lot of fun. That is, in just kind of ending up with the budget schedule, we kind of did the fund balance, the revenue expenditure, and so hopefully tonight we can get through administration, planning development, and parks and recreation. That leaves IT, Brentwood Bound, a little bit more about Brentwood Bound and Public Works, October 27th, Fire and Police for November 3rd, and the hope is we can make a recommendation to the board that night, so it can go to the board on the 7th. Nope, the following one. So the second Monday in November for the first reading and discussion. Questions at this point? All right. Thank you.
I have one little note. Page 37, legislative department's on twice, and there's an arrow to a green section that's like not point. Anyway, just look at the chart on page 37, and it needs some editing.
I will do so.
Okay.
Planning and development?
Yes.
Actually, could I ask one more question? I didn't look at my tabs, and Eric sat down, so maybe Bola can answer or Eric can come back. So on page 40, it is the additional revenue. So I know since we've learned this stuff that went on with St. Louis County, you went through it a little bit, but like the use tax, we increased just since the original version of this budget by 100,000, fire by 62, license by 30, minor sources by 20,000, and permits by 17. So we're, I guess big picture, we're comfortable that that's still conservative,
Yes.
even though we upped it from like a week ago to now.
It's based on what we're seeing as the end of September.
Okay. So-
And we were always conservative, particularly with use tax. But, I think retailers have gotten comfortable with paying it now, so we're seeing more. And we were always told we would see more. So, and this is the first year, 2023, that the Board of Aldermen would be authorizing spending any of that use tax. So it's all based on September ending revenue collections, correct, Eric?
Yeah, and the other thing too, as I said, was that when it's kind of a backwards budget year, and we got the budget complete, and then we're waiting on the 21 audited numbers to come in, so that way we could give an accurate depiction of everything that happened. But when the numbers came in, we were still balanced, so we just plugged the numbers in and wanted to make sure we got you guys to book as quickly as possible. And then when the sales tax information came up, then we took a hard look at where our numbers really came in 21 compared to 20, compared to 19, and where we're at now this year, and that we felt comfortable. Why we didn't do it every line, just a couple lines.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Whitney Kelly, Director of Planning and Development. So I'll be presenting the Planning and Development budget. So our mission is to provide excellent customer service to the Brentwood residents, businesses, and development community and other city departments by providing a one-stop shop for community development, land use planning, zoning, building code administration, code enforcement, flood and plain management, and economic development services. We have strived to meet that goal, to meet our missions, and work to respond to any complaints within 24 to 48 hours. So we include, as part of our goals, providing superior development application processing and permitting and inspection services. We have we've hired 2 new positions, our new building official who's assisted in completing applications and building permits in a timely manner, and our permit tech who's also helped in assisting people with getting more familiar with MyGov, our online permitting system. So we've gone through that and provided a step-by-step guide on the website for residents. So we have to date, well, from September 9th, advised and conducted over 1,900 inspections for building projects, provided plan reviews services for 1,400 building permits, and 1,200 residential occupancy permits, and that was up from 551 from this time last year. So we've provided 349 code enforcement inspections, and due to the recent flooding events, that was an additional 104 inspections of damage of buildings. So I won't go through all of those. Those are in the report yourself. But we've been working hard. So pretty much the budget remains the same as last year's. Last year we did get approval for an extra senior inspector, but at that time y'all wanted us to wait. We would like to continue with that and proceed with actually getting that hired, so we will bring that to you at a later date. And we have 6, that would include 6 full-time staff and 1 part-time code enforcement officer. So we haven't really changed anything from there. Last year we increased the engineering cost to $36,000, and we kept that the same this year. And that was to account for the stormwater plans for the new SWID program, the stormwater infill development, and contracting with Gonzalez to provide stormwater review. There were some minor changes, but for the most part, we did keep things the same. Budget and travel was $3,500 last year, so we kept that the same. That was training. Travel and meetings was $7,000, so we maintained that as well. And
line item for I just noticed that it looks like there's a over $100,000 increase.
yes, so that's the next slide.
Oh.
The big jump is our miscellaneous contractual expenses. Normally, last year we budgeted $53,000. We've upped that to $155,000. That is due to the cost and our discussions that we've been having. The Planning and Zoning Commission, the Architectural Review Board, and the Board of Aldermen wanted us to look at doing a design guidelines. So that's why we needed to up this budget to hopefully proceed with that. And then we just increased other expenses, added a little bit extra just due to cost of some of the other expenses that we're seeing, miscellaneous contractual with code enforcement and grass cutting that we're proceeding with, that kind of thing. But the bulk of that was the need for the design guidelines.
Oh, go ahead. No, I always talk. You talk.
The design guidelines, so I know that initial estimate was about around 100,000. I don't know how we arrived at that other than just sort of some expert opinions of what it might be.
Yeah.
And I guess I think it's important that we do that. I also think it's important that it includes commercial, knowing what we're potentially going to have some new developments throughout the city. So I'm curious if, and especially with labor costs going up and all of the inflation driving up professional services even, is that enough? I guess is the question.
Well, the $100,000 came in when I contacted a few cities that were going through design guidelines. Clayton was looking at their design guidelines for 2 overlay districts. That was very much, and they said they spent close to, they weren't even finished yet, and they spent close to $100,000. So that's why I went with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we budget for enough for residential and commercial, and you know, even if it's not what we end up spending, it's that it's there and that we're not having to shift things around. I mean, if we're going to do this, this is one of those you do it thoroughly and right one time, and then evolve it. But you know, so.
That number is from at least a year ago.
Yeah.
Right? So I think before the board adopts the budget, we can go back out and see if we can get some new numbers and then do a comparison to see if it's enough. And if it's not, then we'll bring it back to you all and let you know.
Great, thank you.
So your line of doing it right the first time brings to mind the rebranding of Hanley Industrial Court, because we just did that and there was not much enthusiasm from the board. So my question is, what's the expense of that? Is the new communications committee also looking at marketing? And should this discussion of rebranding Hanley Industrial Court be part of a larger branding discussion for the city? And so is this something that should be in the budget now, or is should this be part of a larger discussion?
I don't think there's funding, is there? Significant funding for that. So maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more about the money you have in the budget for that.
In the previous descriptions for $50,000, approximately $50,000 in previous year, it included sub-area plannings and the redevelopment of Hanley and rebranding of Hanley Industrial Court. So I included the same so that we can start that process and see, we would have enough funding to start those in the next year. And see where that budget might lie for future years. And we can look into that. But
Could Alderman Gould weigh in on his vision for his new committee?
So the committee meets for our first meeting is next week, right? Next Tuesday, I believe, where we are going to discuss a lot of the vision for the committee. I had a question about that, whether it was here or in administrative budget, but probably should start to discuss how not looking at these as one-off districts and branding. And I know the rebranding of Hanley Industrial Court could mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and that may just be some banner signage that's along the light poles or something like that, right? Versus taking a holistic look at what's the city communication and branding as a brand. I think that is a bigger discussion and probably something that we need to, factor in at least some funding somewhere in the budget.
It's going to be significant. It might mirror the design guidelines.
Yeah, no,
And so
I
that
understood.
money is not in this budget.
I know it's probably not in this particular budget, but it's something that we should probably forecast for in future.
Right.
Or maybe have some money to your discussion about some discovery sessions or something that maybe sets up a larger scope. Maybe there's some smaller funding that we can put in this budget somewhere for some discovery sessions at least on that topic. But I know that's not necessarily planning and development, but maybe it is. I don't.
They have been taking the lead in prior years on rebranding, meetings with the leadership in Hanley Industrial Court primarily.
Okay.
And this has been rolled into the comprehensive plan. So, updating that, sub-area plan. So they have been taking the lead, but I guess with the.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, it's important to do the design guidelines for the structures, architectural design guidelines, because I think there's going to be a lot of information that comes out of that then informs, the holistic rebranding or branding of the city, maybe not rebranding, but, my perspective is let's keep an eye on it and definitely look to do this right, because I think those will have valuable inputs to the other part.
The other items, there was a little increase from 1,500 to 2,000 for this year. Whoops. This year for advertising, just because I'm seeing more and more conditional use permits come through for the Planning and Zoning Commission and Board of Aldermen approval, and therefore I wanted a little more room in that budget because we are getting more of those businesses, and advertising costs could increase. So I just upped it by $500. Petrol is to pay for the gas for our inspectors, and that went from $2,000 to $3,000 due to increase in cost of gas. And when we add a new staff person, they would be driving around as well, so that cost would be in there. Subscriptions and membership remain the same. Uniform purchases was increased from $1,000 to $1,200 to reflect any new staff. And supplies and materials and printing all remain the same. The copier lease last year was $2,700, and that just covered the lease, and we had a service call. And that was paid out of a different line item, but we felt that we should up this budget to account for any services of the copier, so it's in the proper line item. So that's why that increased. That's all I had. So.
Raise your
Well,
hand.
I try. I had to find my question. So I actually have a question for Whitney about your goals and objectives. So it's not actually about the budget. So Whitney, before you go away, I have a question about one of your goals and objectives.
Okay.
Can you explain, it says, continue to provide initial response to all inquiries received through MyGov Request Tracker module within 7 to 10 working days. So what does that mean? Does that mean
That's for building permits, when we get building permits within MyGov. I should probably clarify that.
Yeah,
in
so
the
like
next round.
if someone wants a plumbing inspection, they might wait 10 days?
No, inspection, that's just to review the building plans. Inspections are scheduled within 24 to 48 hours.
8 hours, okay, great. I just
Yeah.
was confused by that.
And any, like code enforcement, like complaints, those are responded to within 24 to 48 hours. It's the review of building plans that it gets into the technical drawings that takes 7 to 10 days.
Perfect, okay. Thank you. That just you might want to clarify that in the language. Thank you. Bola?
So this is an overview of the administration budget. I provide the mission, the goals and objectives of the department. department. As you know, under administration is communications, HR, and finance. And our mission is to provide leadership management, financial planning, information, and policy implementation to the have confidence in the financial stewardship and can make informed decisions, maintain a fiscally sound organization that conforms to legal requirements and to generally accepted financial management principles, support city departments so that they can efficiently and effectively deliver services. The next paragraph lists all the responsibilities under administration, and the ultimate goal is to continue to support the citizens so that they can live, work, and play in this progressive community known as the City of Warren. The next slide is a list of all all administration's goals and objectives. Be responsive in an expedient manner to our citizens, provide ethical reporting and advisory services to the Board of Aldermen in their decision-making process, keep the Board of Aldermen informed of important community issues, and ensure that we as staff continue to provide high customer service level service to our constituents, whether they are residents or businesses or those who are traveling through our community, and continue to support the functional areas of the city, legislative policy implementation, budget development, strategic planning, economic development, communication information technology, public safety, and legal services. And this goes on the second page as well. We provide the performance measures for administration. You will notice that we are projecting an increase in the number of visits to the website. The annual training hours for department employees continues to somewhat increase, not a whole lot. What we continue to see is training on different software, different modules that the city has, MyGov, so that we are able to continue to respond to requests for service in a timely manner. We also track the citywide rate turnover. You know that last year was a really challenging time for some of our departments. I would say that maybe in planning development, maybe a 99% turnover. Man, that was challenging. And then we also had something similar. I don't remember the percentage exactly in finance, but that was monumental. And this year, which is not reflected in here, but maybe you'll see it in Dan's numbers, we continue to experience vacancies we had in our sanitation crew, and what that meant was we weren't able to focus on some street work. Instead, we were busy picking up trash and recycle and things like that. We still see some increase in workers' compensation claims, so there's an opportunity for us to continue to educate our employees about being safe as they do their daily work. And then we have personnel-related policy violation complaints and investigations, and the number of those that have been solved. And external auditor recommendations, I think that number probably should go up, so we will update that by the time we present the final budget. And then the number of journal entries, that number also will go up by year end. So you've heard multiple times this evening that we are asking for an additional position in administration, and that is the controller position. The assistant finance director position is not a full-time position. That position is part-time. Gina Jarvis works about 20-30 hours a week, and I think the experience, I know that the experience that she brings to the city is invaluable. So if it's a part-time orientation type that she wants, that's what we're going to get. But you know, when I think back to all the different accounting type consultants that the city has hired over the years, the city's finance is difficult. And if you look at the transmittal memo, I talk about the number of TIF districts that the city has. When I think back to even the times when Jack's dad was an employee here, Bob Shelton, and Pat Kelly was mayor. Brentwood was cutting edge in the number of TIF districts throughout the state that we had, and they have been very successful. And we have paid many of them down early. But we still have 3, and those numbers are kept off the books. They are not in financial edge. So every time when we're getting ready to do the audit, then we have to start pulling spreadsheets and doing all those calculations. So those are some of the time-consuming effort that all the auditors talk about, that the accounting services that we engage talk about. But I think that if we have more senior level individuals in the department, which would be the gap that the controller would fill, that then we might be better prepared so that, the delays that have happened, we won't have to address those particularly anymore. And then it would take some burden off of the finance director, and I know the goal, absolutely, is to get the audit done in time, and you have indicated that you want to see the schedule, you want to see the planning effort, and so there will be a deliberate steps to ensure that that happens for the 2022 audit. And so the next couple of slides is an explanation of what we hope to accomplish if the board approves the funding of this position. And this is also in the transmittal letter. Just to mention, the city has 4 transportation development districts, 3 remaining tax increment financing districts, and 4 certificates of participation issues, not counting all the lease service agreements that we're having to track. And every now and then, when Standard & Poor's asks for an interview, just preparing for those, it's a lot of work too. Just trying to get that, hoping that they affirm the city's rating, and the ultimate goal is to go to AAA. So I'm hoping in discussions with Stiefel that we will be able to get there sometime soon. Then the expenditure budget. So we are seeing in administration some increases, and then we are seeing some decreases. And this slide provides an explanation of those increases. So there's the position, and then there's the implementation of the compensation plan. Then full-time overtime, we're aligning that expense with actual expenditure that we've seen so far. And then employee benefits, that's also based on the additional position. And increases that we're seeing in benefits, whether it's in health or dental, vision, things like that. And then we're seeing salary, part-time, this expense, which is the finance director, assistant finance director, is being coded to miscellaneous contractual. Expenditure educational benefits, there's no expenditure in this line item. And then miscellaneous contractual, if you remember, the city hired a number of people to help us with the 19, the 20 audit work, and since all of that has been completed, we're reducing those line items accordingly. Community services, the biggest thing on here is the miscellaneous contractual. We budget for sculptures, and we have them for 3 years, and then the expectation is that you would pay it off the 3rd year. So we have fully paid off the, what is it called, blue something.
So
Okay.
we
Cool
own that
scope.
now?
The cool sculpture
Blue
outside.
sculpture, what's that? Okay, well, good enough. So I asked Janet for an explanation on why community relations and newsletter have decreased. So I don't have the response for you on that. And so we're going to want to take a look at that and make sure that those numbers reflect true expenditures. Then lastly, it's the municipal operating expenses decreases employee benefits, aligning that with actual expense. And so what that is when we have people leave the city, especially those that were here, I believe, 2012 or 2013 and beyond that, it's in the employee handbook that those employees will continue to be paid for their both vacation and sick in particular. So we just want to make sure that we have sufficient money to pay those out. Also, we're seeing an increase in legal services and miscellaneous contractual. We identified that we did not fully budget for the IT expense, so we are making sure that we do that in 2023. The finance director expenditure is coded to this line item. And then in capital, we don't really have a lot in capital other than computer replacement. So that is an overview of the administration budget.
Answered my questions. I took off my sticky notes as you answered them in your presentations. It's great.
Thank you.
I do have one question. I think the question that I had about community relations, I think was my concern about why there was a decrease. And as we talk about that, and as we talk in the communications committee, I think some of the things that we need to be mindful of is the shift in how communications are consumed by residents, and having a little bit more social native communications, somebody who we used to have with the Parks Department. So someone who can support the city, and that maybe it doesn't need to be a full-time position. Maybe it can be we can think creatively and partner with some of the universities and get some of the students, or to help do some things as an internship. So I think we should consider some community relations things outside of just the traditional print, is what I'm saying.
All right. I won't go line by line. I have a lot of lines, so I don't want to bore you to death. Plus, you've heard me talk enough tonight. So a couple things. I always like to take this time and kind of look back at some of the things we've done in the past year. And again, I continue to talk to my wife, most importantly, but all my, all the directors around in Mid-County and talk about not only 32 acres of new green space in Brentwood bound, but 10 more acres in Mount Calvary and Bi-State. And it's just, it's an incredible accomplishment for this year of what, with the board's leadership, we've been able to do. And so excited about what we'll be able to do with all this property coming forward. So, look at that, and then it seems so long ago. I still feel like it's February, and I have a picture of something that happened in April. So this year's kind of flown by, but having Alex Cavallini at the ice rink, getting to listen to her speak, and my daughter still talks about some of the things that she said, and kind of the role model that she can be, and we hope to be able to continue to work with Alex. And hopefully her baby when it's born. So, we just talked about some small other things, but it was, for us, when I feel like all I do is work on Brentwood bound stuff, then flooding and then budget, it is kind of nice to kind of say, oh, we did other things too. So, goals and objectives. We'll talk about Brentwood Park though. We get one time to kind of open up this park, and we are already putting some planning on. We'd like to be further along. The toughest thing is being able to get the exact date. So once we have the exact date, then we'll be able to finalize some of the things we want to do. But we've already been kind of putting the groundworks in with different companies and different things that we might want to do. A scavenger hunt throughout the whole park, really kind of showcasing what this park is, not just for kids, but for adults, for seniors. So we're excited about doing that. As we've talked about the master plan already, moving forward, this department is going through a transition. We're going through a transition of a department with a lot of small community parks that are beautiful to having, what we think is going to be a destination. And so how does that all work together? And while we do that, we want to make sure we're sustainable. So we, being part of the Sustainability Committee, making sure that we work with the commission to make sure that the department is following through with things that they're expecting us, and also supporting the Sustainability Commission where we can. And ironically, we've talked about rebranding as well in the Parks and Recreation Department. Not like a full rebrand, but although we could, if that comes out of the Communications Committee, might be something that, we'd be interested in as well. But, we're talking about, we have a new marketing person who's really in tune with all the insights and data behind social media, and has been really doing a nice job pushing out what we've been doing, and really have done a nice job helping increase visibility of our department and making sure that we're doing more and more, not just, hey, here's an ad, but hey, here's beautiful things to look at, or here's something the department's done. And so we're excited about the path forward on that. Some of the revenue highlights, again, as I talked about earlier, we feel like we will be back to pre-COVID levels. We're close this year, but we think next year we'll hit it. So the increases, we talked about the big ones: general programming, the senior programming. Senior programming, it looks much larger, but it's really like $4,000. So when you start small, the increases look a little bit bigger. Skate rentals, we're starting to see admission at the ice rink come back, and people needing to rent skates. So we see that. I think a lot of that's been driven through our Galactic Low skates, because it's kind of a new thing, and it's been really, really well attended. Ice rink rentals, as we talked about, the park permits, we're still conservative, but it is still a 9% increase. And we continue to bring in people in the meeting room. So I think as we looked at the September numbers, maybe October, we're over 100,000 in meeting room rentals this year. So we're getting close. The one place we kind of still see struggling is rink fees. So that is primarily just the Brentwood Hockey League. So as we're continuing to hope that we put on a good product and a much cheaper product than Maryville or Centene, but people are still drawn to the bright and shiny new centers, and they're beautiful facilities. So as I said last year, I cannot compete with a bar and a sugar fire in an ice rink. I wish I could. Better than I am. But it is, Maryville has that, Centene has a bar and a gas station, so it's hard to tire those away, but we think we'll get them back one day. Just a graphical representation of what we see. So we're hitting, this is basically everything but sales tax, and a couple small minor things like sales, city property, interest. So this is just our fees and charges. We're looking at this today, and we feel like there's like a 5-year curse, so maybe we should really bring down 2025. 15 was the renovation, 20 was COVID, so we kind of see it's up and down. But those are the two reasons for those years, and let's just hope nothing happens in 25. Expenditures, overall you see a 15% increase in personnel services. There's a couple main reasons. One is in the park maintenance side, it's additional to those 4 staff. Minimum wage, which is not $11.15 to $11.15, $11.15 to $12. It is the last year of the state of Missouri's minimum wage plan, and I know there's been rumblings about maybe trying to increase that even more, but let's hope right now that's going to stay there, and obviously the implementation of the compensation plan. We did see in the whole department park maintenance increase because of Brentwood bound in the compensation plan. The 225% increase in general programming and 173% increase in fitness is offset by revenue. So although those look big, we actually look at net bottom line for each area. And so our net bottom line is increasing in both those areas over this year. And last is we'll pay off the Brentwood Rec Complex certificate of participation in 2024. So that's exciting, and that will give more funding, I think, for the 2018 COPS. Capital, I've talked about the master plan so many times, but here it is again. With opening of Brentwood Park and the new parkland, it is an optimal time to reassess the park system priorities. It's been discussed at Public Works. I agree with all the sentiments of the Public Works Committee, is making sure that what we have in our plan is still valid. And a great example is we call for a splash pad in Memorial Park. Well, I don't know if we don't need a splash pad because we have a beautiful new splash pad in Brentwood Park. So those are the things we need to talk about and do. We've talked about the Memorial Bridge already, and then the parking maintenance utility vehicle. So endowment, I talked about that last year. I just thought I'd put it in there again this year, is the idea of we're still trying to continue to fund things at the Brentwood Park. And as we talked about a lot tonight about equipment replacement reserve, is the same thing with that park. I mean, that is going to be a park, a beautiful park, but it will have expenditures in the future. And one of the ways to kind of get a head start on that is creating an endowment fund. Hopefully we'll be able to do it through naming rights, but if we can't, it might be something to consider in some other manner. That is my quick presentation, knowing that there'll be questions.
I have a quick question, Eric, on just out of curiosity on the rationale. So, your budgeted amount for petroleum products has gone down. Would we not expect maybe an increase with the additional park and additional use?
It's going down in, let me make sure I'm saying this right. We have two different petrol lines. We have one in administration, and that is the one city vehicle we have, and the propane for the Olympia. And the other one is in park maintenance, and I believe that one should have went up. I'm almost positive it went up. So it did go up in park maintenance.
It did, you're right.
Yes. On the wrong page.
No, it actually went down in park maintenance. 14.5 to 14.2. On page 200.
705, yeah, 200, 705, 9, 6196.
Correct.
We saw, what we're expecting is kind of what everyone else is expecting, is that gas will level out at some point.
Right.
We budgeted for this year, let me make sure I got that right, 11,000, and we're estimating 14.5 and going up to 14.2. So there's an increase over adopted budget. We do think that we've hit, hopefully, hit the high of the gas crisis, and we'll see those numbers come down. But we did expect to see increases with Brentwood Park as well. But the other thing we're doing is we're also replacing gas vehicles with electric vehicles as well. So we're hoping that will help out as well.
I do have a question about the part-time overtime at sorry, 615 in the expenses. It's jumped to, from the current year, the budget, the adopted budget that we had in 2022 was 1840. Current year, we've not even hit that, but yet we've got an estimate of 4,000 and then a proposed of for 2023 of 4,326. What do we expect those part-time for that one, as well as general programming part-time? General program part-time jumped up to 16,000.
Oh yeah, that one jumped up a lot. So the two, the first one, we have multiple part-time staff lines. The one that you're talking about specifically is for the staff upstairs in the community center. And a lot of it depends on what we have going on holidays. We budget to make sure that we're open on holidays. So we are not open on Christmas or New Year's, Thanksgiving. Those are the three main ones. If there's nothing scheduled, and say like a President's Day, we'll close that community center side of it. We'll keep the ice rink open. But if we do have programming, or more importantly, rentals, we will staff that for them.
So is this just labor increase costs?
It's scheduling for all of it. What you've seen in the past is that we've probably not been open all those.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
typically, no one comes in for 4th of July. Typically, no one comes in for Labor Day. So a lot of times, we will drop, but to be honest, I mean, that $3,000 is just more to make sure that we have budget just in
Okay.
case we're open.
That makes sense. And then I just
General
have.
programming, let me answer that one
Yes,
too.
yeah,
General
please.
programming is primarily the fact that we're running so many more general programs that is instructors to help us run those programs. And so it is a healthy jump, but it is, we're still showing a net bottom line of over $10,000 in that program.
And the only other thing I'd say is yes, let's be creative in figuring out how we stay competitive with the ice rink, with that community. I mean, it's important to that community, so much so that I just wanted to share that I did receive an email from the person who was sending a complaint to us about the condition, and he says the ice rink the last few weeks has been greatly improved. It's a real delight to enjoy nice ice. It looks impressive, smooth as glass from edge to edge, and it's even so much safer and fun for everyone. So good job, whatever has been done to fix the ice.
There's two. I mean, we have new staff. I mean, when we talk about, we'll talk about staff turnover, we turned over our entire the maintenance department inside. And driving a Z is somewhat of an art, and you have to kind of get used to it. When it's time to buy a new Z, they've almost dummy-proofed it to the point where you can't speed up, you can't slow down. It is, you basically go and everything, the blade
They make them like
adjusts.
iRobots now? And they
Yeah,
just
I
go
mean,
in?
almost. I mean, it is almost that simple. All you have
Yeah.
to get on and push down the gas, and so that's something we're real excited about because that will help us in these times where we have some turnover.
And again, this is a person that doesn't live in Brentwood and, can have choices of going anywhere, so. Just shows how important it is.
So, similar to the question I asked Whitney, when you talk about rebranding Parks and Rec, do you have money set aside to rebrand, or is this just the new marketing person you have that's doing a lot more social media outreach?
A couple things. One is we're going to review our marketing plan and probably update the marketing plan, especially as we look at the new parkland that we're getting with Brentwood Bound and the other two areas. It is part of our advertising budget, do some of those things. We're not talking about trying to get a brand new logo or paying those type of things. We're just trying to kind of get a fresher feel of the things that you see around, and you see even possibly what staff wears and things like that, just to kind of be a little bit more fresh. Thank you.
So does that conclude our budget topics for this evening? Are we moving off of 4B? Oh, yeah, of course, there are other items on that. I just wanted to, and then I know I saw it earlier, just when we take the budget topics up again, Thursday, what will be the departments that will?
No, you should, please don't. I'm going to be out of town next Thursday, and I'll be on Zoom, but please don't move them up. Thank you.
I just don't have it in front of me, just so what can,
IT and
IT, Brentwood Bound, and Public Works presentation for next Thursday.
You could push them back, but please don't move them. I mean, like.
great. Well, thank you, everybody. All right, there's no item 5. Item 6 on the agenda is the consent agenda. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes from October 6th meeting? Any? All right, item 7 on the agenda is old business. 7A is the Missouri Local Government Employees Retirement System, the loggers benefit, the continued discussion. Who is leading us?
Hi, Jason.
Hi, am I ready?
You're ready.
Okay. So at the last meeting, one of the aldermen had the question about where we are with regards to loggers in terms of our level of participation versus our comparators. Unbeknownst to me, prior to that, that information is actually available across the board for any and all participants. So I was able to pull that data, and that is in the memo that I included. And as you look through that memo, one of the things that will kind of jump out at you is we are the only one of our municipalities that participates in loggers at the level that we're at. Every one of our other comparators is at a slightly higher level than the city of Brentwood is. So that kind of goes back to the request to take this to the full board. So that's kind of where we're at. And if anybody had any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So my first question is, several of the cities have an employee contribution. So does that
Correct.
mean that their contribution goes to the percentage that the city has to pay? Or is this like can an employee contribute additional for them? Like, could an
It
employee?
is not a,
For themselves?
I understand
like,
what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is not like a 457 or anything like that, where the employee adds funds to it. They're basically paying a portion of the required amount to go into the plan. So I think that answers your question.
Yes, it does. So this is a really big request. So this is about $100,000 a year plus a $660,000 catch-up payment. So over the next decade, this is a $1.8 million cost to the city.
One quick clarification, ma'am. It's not an additional, the 660 is built into that amount that's paid each year. That's what drives that number down.
Okay, well, that wasn't how I understood the stuff from the state, but regardless, it's $1 million. It's $1 million
Yes, ma'am.
increase. So we really seem proud that we do market-based research with our HR policies, and we hire an external expert to look at our HR policies and recommend changes to us. This was not on the list. I'm not saying that it might not be something we should look at, but it was not on the list this year. The turnover rate, you sort of mentioned that this might help with turnover. Well, the turnover's gone down, and you're projecting next year it's going to go down to 6.5%. So something good is going on, but this might not be something that would help. And the other thing I'd like to do is, it is an investment, and if this is really important to employees, is there a percentage that they should contribute? So I guess I'd really prefer to move this discussion to the next time that Higbee and Associates or whoever else we might use to analyze our benefits could incorporate this into the bigger picture of all our benefits, and not just do this as a one-off thing that has come before us and is more expensive than what was originally proposed in the summer.
Fair enough.
So if that, I guess that's a motion to postpone this discussion and include it with the next HR review.
Second that.
The loggers discussion until is regularly scheduled to do that. And there's been a second. Is there any discussion? Right. Seeing none.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderman Shelton.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Okay. Were there other issues to cover on that topic?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on. Item 8 on the agenda is new business. 8A is repeal of the mandate of the vaccine mandate in the Brentwood employee.
So that one's me also. Back to me. As you can see by the memo that I had put forth, this actually kind of came to our attention about maybe 2 weeks ago. And in essence, the House bill, I believe it's 1606, has a portion that we have run through our attorneys, and they have indicated that it definitely is applicable. And as such, we need to remove that portion of the employee handbook and stop the enforcement of that particular aspect of the policy.
So just to clarify, we've been big-footed out of this, is that right?
Yes. I like the vernacular used. Yes, I would say that would be the case. Yes,
So
ma'am.
when the state legislature passes a law and it becomes law, it trumps what, I don't even want to use that.
And the law is specific
Municipal
to
ordinances that we
pertaining-
pass, right?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. It's specifically pertinent to municipalities. It does not cover private businesses or anything like that, but it definitely hamstrings organizations such as ours.
We don't really have a choice.
Correct.
But is this an administrative thing?
Or
that-
do we need
Do we, do we need to vote on it? Because it seems like it just needs to be, and does this go to the full board? Okay.
So I'll make a motion to remove the vaccine mandate from the employee handbook and eliminate weekly testing for employees who have an exemption currently.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second to remove the vaccine mandate from the employee handbook. Is there? Bad law, but I'll still follow the law. All right, well, I guess we'll take a roll call, please.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderman Shelton.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
All right, that one was pretty easy.
Thank you.
So, item, what? Oh, yeah, do we have any item 9 on the agenda, citizen comment? We've seemed to have driven away.
There are no comments.
In person, is there anyone
One
online?
online. No.
Seeing none, and as I'm sure that everyone, alderman who will rush to YouTube to watch this first episode of Budget Review, if you phone in, as in past practice, I'm happy to recognize you if you've got a question at this level. I think that only helps the dialogue. All right, well, seeing no one signed up for citizen comment, seeing no further business before us, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.